WVTC Radio Detroit. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, our website, www.wvtcradio.com, or download our WVTC app from the Play Store for Android users and the App Store for iPhone users. Thank you for tuning to WVTC Radio Detroit and the Community Bell Show with your host, former Wayne County Commissioner, Edna Bell. Stay tuned for insightful information Detroiters will find valuable. Text a friend and tell them to watch with you for news you can use. And now, your host, Edna Bell.
Well, hello, everyone. It is Monday at 4 o'clock, so it must be the Community Bell Show. We are so glad to have all of you with us today. We're glad you continue to watch and listen to us. It's really a pleasure to have you. And we have a very special guest this afternoon, someone that you all may already know, but if you don't, you need to know who she is. It is State Senator Sylvia Santana. Sylvia, welcome to the show. Again,
yes,
because you've been on before.
Good afternoon and happy Valentine's Day to everyone.
Oh, that's right. It is Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. It's a good day. You know, we're up and about, so it must be a good day. Thank you for joining us today. We're always happy to see your smiling face on our show to inform us about what's going on in the community. So you're probably gonna be one of those regular people that we ask to come on and tell us what's going on in Lansing and what's going on in your senatorial seat in Anything else you'd like to tell us? So how's everything today?
Things are great. No complaints here. Definitely we got up on a Monday running right after a Super Bowl and
Oh,
we're going to
yes.
keep going and going and definitely just continue to stay focused and in the district. Absolutely.
That is wonderful. Just where is your district, Senator?
Yeah, so my district currently encompasses the city of Detroit on the north side. So the eastern border is Livernois, the western border is the Five Points area. And it goes all the way from Telegraph South, and then it loops into Dearborn as well as Melvindale, the city of Melvindale.
Okay, now is that the current district or the new district?
That is the current district. When we talk about the new district maps that were decided by the Michigan Redistricting Commission, my district will encompass 96 South, still that eastern border being Livernois. And then I go into the southern portion of Southwest Detroit, Livernois to Dix, and then still encompassing all of Dearborn, and then the eastern part of Detroit, 96 South to Dearborn, and then Dearborn Heights.
So
and
you'll have
two precincts in Allen Park. Let me make sure I mention that.
How crazy is that? They just had to find a few more people to throw in. Is that it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They could have thrown some more people in from Detroit, would have made more sense. But
that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, but, that's a long conversation. So you've got Detroit, Dearborn Heights, and a tiny piece of Allen Park, is it? Or Melvindale?
That is correct. So
is it Melvindale or Allen Park?
It's Allen Park.
Allen Park, okay.
So So this district, my house sits smack in the middle of the whole district, right on the Ford border there.
Well, that's
from
good.
Detroit to Dearborn, so absolutely.
Well, and it's a blessing that we have somebody who actually lives in her district. Because I'm not going to talk about the folks who don't live in their district. That's for another show. But we have somebody
it's funny you should say that, because people think I don't live in my district, and I've lived in my house for 18 years now. Mm-hmm. And love the Warrendale community and seen it at its best and at its opportunity times. So I look forward to continue to grow my 3 children there and continue to be a part of the community.
Yes, and everybody, she's got 3 lovely children, the oldest of which, Miss Sophia, is in a few plays at school. Talk about Sophia a little bit. I just love her.
Oh, yeah. So my daughter, Sophia, is definitely an actress in the making. She is definitely into the theater and the arts. And one of her first productions was The Addams Family. She played a lead role as Morticia Addams. And
how about that?
Yes, it's wonderful. You talk about seeing your children evolve before you, and just wondering, what are these kids going to do with their lives? You start to question, oh, Lord, did I make a mistake? Did I not do things the right way? Did I not train them properly? But I think when you see them evolve the way I've seen my oldest daughter evolve at the age of 15 now, definitely it just makes you proud to be a parent of someone who has learned how to speak truth to power and learn how to stand up for what is right in the community and for people who don't know how to stand up for themselves. So I think we may have a future elected official in the making.
Yes, isn't it wonderful to watch them? And you never know how they're going to turn out, but it's just a blessing to watch them and say, oh, okay, I did all right. So yeah. You'll be able to say that too in a few years, because you still got 2 little ones. And they'll be coming up doing the same thing, I'm sure. So it's just a wonderful thing to watch mothers in politics, because nobody knows how things really work. How because mothers have to make all sorts of things fit and jumble 20 balls at a time and do all sorts of things. So yeah, mothers know how to do those kinds of things. And that's a blessing. Yeah. Yes. We'll talk a little bit about redistricting.
Yeah, so we speaking of redistricting, we have seen where obviously the Michigan Redistricting Commission has decided on their final map selections, and for the Senate in particular, the maps that they've decided on would be the Linden map. This map does provide for a fairer chance as far as partisan politics goes for Democrats to have a fair chance of picking up the majority because those districts are a little bit more equitable as far as Republican Democrat population or numbers. However, it does provide for some concern overall, because what we are finding is that through this redistricting process that with the Voters' Rights Act being something that should be top priority, when it came to the restructuring of these maps, it was not the priority. And so we are concerned, or I would say that there is a concern overarching that you will see that there will be a lack of representation coming out of the city of Detroit. You have potentially between the House and the Senate 16 seats of individuals who potentially could represent Detroit, with a significantly smaller portion of those folks actually living in the city of Detroit. And so that's concerning. When it comes to actual Black representation, currently we have 5 members of the Senate who actually represent the city of Detroit, and 4 of those individuals being African American. But the reality is that with the way the new maps are drawn, you may have 2 representatives who actually live in the city of Detroit who represent a portion of Detroit. So that's something that really, like I said, is a factor. And we do see where lawsuits have been filed for both the Senate maps and the House maps. The Supreme Court justices have ruled on the Detroit lawsuit. And so there is going to be an appeal for that lawsuit, because the justices decided to go with the maps that the Redistricting Commission decided upon. So we do see where there's 2 pending lawsuits and an appeal for the Detroit lawsuit.
Wow. And we've got an election coming up.
Yes. And so that's concerning. Yeah, we have election coming up. It's concerning. We're about 65 days away from the filing deadline, and we still don't know what are going to be the outcomes from the 2 maps, the other 2 lawsuits that are still pending, and what the appeal process will look like for the maps that have been drawn, or that the Detroit delegation has also their suit. So that is concerning, because at the end of the day, we want to see the opportunity to win majority and that there's fairer maps. However, at what expense do we, get that opportunity? So it is a concerning factor for all of us. And more importantly, we want to make sure that we're always positioned as elected officials to actually continue to run in our seat. And so that is a whole nother operation on the campaign side that needs to happen. And people need to be trained on that too, how to raise money, how to continue to make sure you're in front of your voters and your constituents. And that's a whole nother opportunity that we can talk about, in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, when is the filing deadline?
So the filing deadline is April the 19th. And like I said, we're about 60 something days out from that. And so that is the filing deadline for any candidate who's looking to put their name on the ballot. And so I guess the question is, where are you running?
Exactly.
For a lot of people.
How do people know where they're going to run? And if they actually live in the district they want to run in. And so it's going to be quite an interesting time.
It is, but the voters voted overwhelmingly for this process because they felt that it would be more equitable for, for the constituents to get the representation of their choosing through a process that is actually ran by the constituency. And so, definitely we've seen across, numerous of states where this has been the case as well, where they've taken the liberty to have a commission vote on maps to support the redistricting aspect of things. But there is like I said, there's an overarching concern that we won't have any Black representation in the state. We represent 14% of the population, and by all means, we want to make sure that that representation is visible in our legislative body as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think even though voters voted to have a redistricting commission, I think they were believing that that commission would adhere to the voting rights rules and would continue as had been in the past, that majority populations in certain areas would have representation. And that is certainly not what they have done. And so more to come on that. I'm sure there'll be much more to come on that, much more to come. Well, talk about what's going on in our wonderful state capital.
Absolutely.
And
So
the big thing is money. I'm sure everybody wants to hear about the money, but before we get to the money, talk about the process that we would go through.
Absolutely. So during, obviously during this pandemic, we've had to make some decisions, and our federal government had to make some decisions as well to make sure that states will be able to support their constituency through this pandemic process, as well as make sure that resources were available to sustain our most pertinent businesses, our hospitals, our business entities that were not operational during the pandemic, our small business owners and the like. And so what we have seen in our state through the prior administration, the 45's administration, as well as our current President Joe Biden's administration, is that through the Congress and through those decisions, they've made decisions to fund our states at a higher level for some of these issues that are really pertinent to our communities when it comes to the budget. So what I'll say is just this: because they've taken a liberty to make sure that people had unemployment benefits and make sure that companies were made whole and hospitals were made whole during this time, we have found ourselves as a state in a situation where we have more money and revenue and resources than we did before.
Now, isn't that amazing?
I just want to say this: before all this money came, you've seen where the Republicans were always bucking heads with the governor's office and the Democrats. But it seems like money makes everybody smile and everybody's ready to spend. But the reality is that through this process, we've had such a tough time figuring out how to spend the money and how to best make sure that we're allocating those dollars to make sure that we are doing the best due diligence to support things that need to be sustained through the budget.
Okay. How much additional money did we get from the federal government?
So I'm going to just speak to the numbers I'm aware of. So when you think about the 2019 budget, we were at a budget of around, I want to say, $60 billion or so, $63 billion or on average. Right now, we are at $74.1 billion.
Oh my, that's a considerable amount more than we had.
Absolutely. So through the CARES Act and through the ARPA dollars, we have a significant amount of more money than we did before. Now, I just want to say this. Now, that's one portion of it. The federal dollars is one piece of it, but everybody in Michigan likes to spend money. And through this pandemic, we have spent money online, which I'm so happy that we passed that legislation for the Wayfair tax, where we would be able to collect taxes online for the sales that are generated online, because most people were shopping online. And that has also helped to increase our sales tax revenue as well. But wow. Yeah, definitely.
So we have money, huh?
Yes, we have been placed in a very strategic position that prior to this pandemic, we were on the forefront of having to really look at our projected budget and cut because we had unfunded liability that would have hit our books in 2023. But because we are in a healthy financial situation, we definitely are in a unique position to really do great things for the state of Michigan and for our communities.
Well, that's always good news, and always good news to hear that both sides of the aisle want to spend. Highly unusual. Highly unusual. Well, tell us some of the things.
Well, I'll preface that one. Some want to spend and some want to pay off debt. So that's
Um,
just
uh,
look at it that way.
what kind of debt would we be looking at paying off?
So we will be looking at paying off some of our bond liabilities that we have across the state. So, for example, capital projects that we've had, throughout the state that we've taken bonds on. For example, when we had passed the original road budget back when I just say back in 2015, 2014, we passed the road budget. That was kind of just a Band-Aid. But a portion of that was actually liability or bonded out for bonds. So that was something that those capital improvements or those infrastructure improvements, those would be some of the liabilities that we would be paying off. Any type of brick and mortar projects that we have as a state, we would be paying off those, and even potentially some of our leasehold agreements. So leases that we potentially had that we could pay off vis-a-vis our bond dollars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that it will be interesting conversation and discussion, I'm sure, on how that money is spent. What does the budget that the governor recommends say?
Yeah. So, and I probably should segue and going through a little bit of the process and then kind of
Yes.
highlight the governor's budget. So a lot of people don't know, pretty much how the state budget works. But if you consider like your household budget, I would use it as a parallel. You probably, at the beginning of the year say, I'm going to pay off all this debt from Christmas and pay off all my credit cards. And, then I get my tax refund and then decide to invest, in maybe purchase a new vehicle, home, whatever. So for a state budget process, it's a little different from that, your household budget, obviously. But what I will say is that in the state budget, what we do first and foremost is look at an outlook of where we are today. So we go through what we call a consensus revenue estimating conference. And that's where our economists in our state, in partnership with some of our U of M and our Michigan State and some of our influential colleges who help support that effort, will go through our economy's budget, our budget here in the state, look at our sales revenue, look at our higher industries like automotive, things that we are, generating revenue from in our state, and they'll see where we are, what the landscape of our outlook, how much money we're spending versus how much money we have versus how many kindergartners are projected to go to school in the fall. Those are all of the things that we look at as a state through the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference. And then that process typically happens at the end of January. And then what happens is that the governor, from that conversation through with the state legislature and others, she will implement or propose her budget process or propose her budget based off of what she projects from where we are as a state as far as revenues go. So she'll look at that budget and talk to her department heads and decide based on the projections that they talk about, so for example, with DHHS case management, how many people we have who potentially may need support through that budget, or, how many seniors might need support through food programs and things of that nature. We're making she's making those decisions based off what the departments are telling her the potential projections might be. Okay. And so what she will do is provide a budget, and will produce that budget and present that budget to us, the legislature, as the initial conversation in the month of February. And so once we have reviewed that budget, then the legislators begin the process of meeting with departments and meeting with stakeholders to figure out what we want to do by way of the executive recommendations in her budget and what we propose as a budget to move forward. So our job as the state legislature is to listen to the governor's budget, take the recommendations, and then decide what we shall do moving forward. Now, this process can be either very succinct and everybody gets along and with a $74.1 billion budget, I don't see where we have a lot of infighting. However, you just never know.
Yes.
So one of the things, and considering this an election year as well, that also can change what people feel also. So we will go over those budget line items and also talk to the departments and question them and talk about what they have foreseen in the prior year and what they foresee this year and make recommendations from there. So once that process happens, hopefully it happens between May and June, we go back to talking to our consensus revenue, our Senate Fiscal Agency and House Fiscal Agency, who they will then in May give us another budget update as to where we are as a state and how the dollars are flowing. From there, hopefully by June, July, we've made a determination as a legislature, and then we will have a group of people who sit together and discuss that budget. The committees will approve those budgets or not approve those budgets. Those budgets then will go to the Senate and House floors for conference. The conferences will meet, and usually those are the chairs of all of the budgets. So, for example, I'm the vice chair of the minority vice chair of the Health and Human Services budget, as well as the vice chair of the Department of Insurance and Financial Services and License and Regulatory Affairs. So I'll make a decision on those budgets and then go to the smaller groups of the vice chairs and the minority vice chairs to make a final decision with the governor's office. And from there, and then we fight it out with the House. The Senate proposes their budget, the House proposes their budget. We battle those budgets out, come to some consensus, and then hopefully get a budget signed by our governor.
Okay.
So that's the process. Then in October, those typically the budget cycle ends for us, and then we have to start all over again. And those dollars,
Fun and games. And so the budget has to be approved by September 30th?
Yes, absolutely. The budget has to be approved by September 30th. October 1, that's it. We have to start new.
We're off and running with new amounts of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now, in terms of monies that individual cities get, do they get monies from the state, and how do they get that money?
Absolutely. So there are several buckets of dollars that go directly to municipalities. Obviously, we have several different budgets. Infrastructure, MDOT runs that budget. We have the DEAGLE budget, which is the environmental piece. When you think about brownfields or buildings in your communities that need to be knocked down, or either the properties need to be remediated, that's the budget that those issues go through, or permitting process for environmental issues. That's the budget that those go through. Then we have our school aid fund, where, like Detroit Public Schools, obviously they get allocated a certain amount of dollars that goes directly to the city, but then those dollars are issued to the school itself, the schools themselves. Then you have also the counties. The counties receive dollars for different programs, like our mental health programs through DWIN, and then they also receive dollars for other areas like infrastructure and roads and the like. And so, and revenue sharing, which is one of the big ones. Those are how dollars get through the state and then go to our local municipalities. But revenue sharing is one of the biggest ones. And that's where the state allocates a percentage of funds to the local municipalities for their general fund. So they have those dollars for their discretion to allocate on a city council level.
And how do they determine how much municipalities get?
It could be based off restricted funds. For example, For the revenue share, that's based off a percentage. And so that's how that, and then it also is based off oftentimes population. So when you think about the census, that also could be a portion of it. Depends on what the fund is, though.
Okay. You mentioned census. Just I want to digress for a minute and talk about that for a minute, because this is one that still bugs me. And of course, we know the census determines how much money we get from the federal government, but it also determines how much money municipalities get from the state and cities get from the state. Talk about persons who are in prisons and the fact that wherever they were counted gets the money, even though they didn't live there. Those places don't have to do anything to provide them any services. The places that they return to or used to live are the ones that are going to have to provide the services. So talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I apologize. My computer is running a little high here. Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that we try to bring up before the actual census process took place here in Michigan, which the census, for those of your listening audience who don't know, the census takes place every 10 years. Federal government requires us to count our populations in our state. Because so that they can reallocate, resources, as well as seats in Congress, as well as throughout the states as well. And so one of the things that we've discovered over the past few years is that through prison populations, those populations of people are actually accounted for at the prisons. So they are not accounted for back in their residence where they live. And so when you look at how the redistricting commission process has happened in our state, had they taken the opportunity to count those individuals who were residing in a prison, then potentially we could have more seats by way of Wayne County in general. From the past 2020 census, what has occurred is that you have in the House of Representatives 11 seats that are in rural areas where prisons are located, where 4 to 5% of those populations of individuals that were accounted for in those areas were accounted for those actual elected seats. And so when you think about that, those individuals are coming back to Wayne County or wherever they reside. They don't reside in a rural area, let me tell you that. But when they return from prison, they're coming back to Detroit, they're coming back to Wayne County. And the reality is that their representation is not equitable to actually where they need the resources to go. And so if I don't have the number of people in the elected office that represent that population, it's hard to get things done. It's hard to push for services and resources if we don't have the proper people and the amount of people representing those individuals at the state legislature. So think about that, 11 seats with 4 to 5% of their population that came from another area, and most likely it was Wayne County.
And they will not be representing the interests of those people. They just won't, because those people won't even be living anywhere in the areas that they represent. Nobody from Ionia is going to be living there once they get out of prison.
That's right.
They're going to come back to Wayne County, or they may go to Flint, they may go to Saginaw, but they won't be in Ionia. And Ionia is going to get the benefit of all of those dollars that would go to those persons for their assistance, but Ionia doesn't have to use it for them. They're going to use it for their own people.
Yeah. So we will be continuing to push that legislation to get it done, so that way we're prepared for the next census count. I would have really liked to get it, actually got it through the chambers before the actual redistricting piece had occurred, because I think it would be meaningful to be able to account for that population, which is almost 20%. So when you think about it, 20% of the population that's in the correction systems is coming from the Wayne County, Detroit area.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a significant number.
That is absolutely significant. Absolutely significant. And they're coming back to areas that are going to need those dollars to help for mental health services, other health services, all sorts of services, educational services for children, all sorts of things. And so it's unfortunate that people would rather, I call it stealing because that's what they're doing. They're stealing the dollars from municipalities for their own use, and they're not using them in the right manner. It's just
Yeah,
out and out theft.
and I think when you think about it, 11 seats is a significant amount to flip this house, or
Yes.
just think about that. Like even from just a party standpoint, like if those individuals that population was being accounted for back in Wayne County, I mean, think we would have more seats, obviously, because the population will reflect as such. And so I think that's something that we definitely have to take into consideration moving forward and push the gerrymandering bill.
Absolutely. 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 And I said we weren't going to talk about this, and we're not going to talk about it but a minute. Um, Sandy asked about the 13th congressional seat.
Mhm.
And just know everyone that seat will be vacant. The Honorable Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence has decided to retire after serving this community so well for so many years. And so there will be an election to select who the next person will be to represent that district. Now, just let me do words. Right now, she represents the 14th congressional district. But because of redistricting and because of the census and so on, the new district that would be where she used to be will be called the 13th congressional district.
Mhm.
Now, for those of you who just think about 13 and 14, the 13th district will become the 12th district. So, and why is that? That is because of the census, we lost a congressional seat because we didn't have enough people fill out the census forms. I absolutely do not believe we lost population in those areas. However, folks didn't fill the forms out. So officially, we lost. And so we lose a seat. So from going from 14 congressional seats to 13 congressional seats. So the seat that Brenda Lawrence held as a 14th congressional district will now become the 13th congressional district. However, it will not look like the old 14th congressional district because of the redistricting lines. And I don't have it in front of me, Sylvia, but do you have a general idea of what the district looks like now? Doesn't it take in part of Macomb County, or does it?
I believe I would have to pull it up, and I don't have
And
it
I
in front of me. But
yeah,
I
and
want
I
to say it's when you think about it, it's mostly the east side of Detroit.
okay.
Um, I
East side of
think,
Detroit, Grosse Pointe, Harper
yeah,
Woods, um, and it
I,
goes up into Southfield also, or they're into Oakland County.
yeah, it goes into Oakland County, and then the 12th congressional obviously takes up the new 12th congressional seat takes up Southfield, all the way across Detroit. I would say towards, and then it also encompasses some of the downriver area as well,
Mhm.
Livonia and the like.
So
They're interesting seats.
it will be very different than what we've been accustomed to. Um, and so there will be lots more conversation that we will be having about that 13th congressional seat. There's lots of conversation going on now. We hope within the next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll have more to tell you about what's going on with that seat. But do know that there is a lot of attention being paid to it, a lot of attention being paid to that seat. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You go ahead now, Sylvia. I had to throw that in
No worries. I was going to try to figure out what the seat looks like. I apologize. I'm only paying attention to my seat right now.
I know.
And try to pick up majority. So, but when it comes to, so you kind of know about we go circle back on the state budget. So the governor obviously introduced her recommendations for the budget. And let me just tell you, I think, from the prior budget, I'll just say this, it takes a lot of work. It is a collective effort to make sure that that priorities that are designated or that impact our communities and poor communities and communities of color, it is very important that there is a team effort around those efforts. And I just want to say that sickle cell, one of the things that I championed last legislative cycle, has been funded,
Oh,
so that
wonderful.
so that adults who need that access to pain relief and care can get that access. And so we funded $6.7 million to help support those efforts, because when you got programs like cystic fibrosis, which I'm not taking away from that, but that's funded 3 times more than sickle cell in our country. When you think about that, and it's just as debilitating as sickle cell, and sickle cell is just as debilitating as cystic fibrosis, but it's funded 3 times more than sickle cell disease. And so I'm happy that our state is prioritizing this in this budget and moving forward, to make sure that those individuals get care that are adults. Because a lot of times what happens, they go to the emergency room and people look at them and they think they're just there to get drugs versus they're in pain. And so we have to do more about educating our healthcare community to make sure that they understand that this is a priority, and that they understand what what sickle cell looks like for individuals in our community and how to support best.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I'm happy that they got funded. But I think when you look at the governor's budget recommendations, what you're going to find is that it is people centric, dealing with those kitchen table issues that matter to Michiganders. And I think it is something that really is important to our communities across the board. So I'll just start off with the school aid fund, because I think education is one of the key pivotal areas in our communities that, Whitney Houston, God rest her soul, said it best: the children are the future. We got to invest in our children, and we got to make sure that they know that they're the future and that their future matters to us. And so what the governor has presented through her pupil increase, there is $150 million going to special education needs to make sure that we're prioritizing special education. There's $222 million going to increase for economically disadvantaged students, those students that need the wraparound services, to make sure that they can continue to have a great education despite where they may live or where they grow up, or if they're in a traumatic situation. We want to make sure that they are prioritized when it comes to school. So that's happening. $1.7 billion for educator retention program. As you know, Edna, and I know, we have an education teacher shortage. We knew this
It's
before
emergency time.
ASAP. So we knew this going into the pandemic. Obviously we had prioritized letting teachers who are retired come back to be educators, and put their retirement in dormant, so that they can continue to, help support the school systems. But through this pandemic, a lot of teachers have decided to retire, move into other professions outside of being teachers, because quite frankly, it is hard being an educator. And definitely I think that, we want to commend our teachers for the work that they do, because it is a lot. And I think parents learned that through this pandemic. Wait a minute.
Yes.
Okay,
They couldn't wait to get those children back to the teachers.
Listen, my little snotty nosed kid is not as cute as I thought he was. Yeah,
Yes.
he got issues. Yes, listen to the teacher. But I think that overall, I think that prioritizing education retention, or educator retention, is key. I mean, we've lost teachers to other states. Unfortunately, we can't change the weather here in Michigan, but what we can do is prioritize paying off student loans for teachers, making sure that they get bonuses. And that's what this is designed to do, is make sure that they get bonuses in their checks, or make sure that they get those additional resources, make sure we increase their pay. When you look at countries like Sweden and Finland and Germany, who prioritize education, and teachers are the profession, the salary reflects the profession. That's important. And so those teachers over there are starting out at $80,000 or more. And so and they still prioritize education and the teachers that they get. You want the best teachers in the schools to help educate our students. And so I think that 1.7 billion says that we're serious about making sure that happens.
That is wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. Also, we put in 600 million to make sure that we can recruit teachers as well. We wanted to make, well, I should say the governor. The governor wanted to make sure that, you know, if we have a pathway forward for our parapros to become educators, if we have a pathway forward for students who are interested in becoming educators, that we give them that opportunity. So she put additional money in for that. You know, it starts with the Great Start Readiness Program. So we got to start
Yes,
when kids are little, when they're sponging all the information, when they are attentive and want to learn as much as they can. So we put 50,
exactly.
so there's $56 million allocated towards increasing the Great Start Readiness programs across the state of Michigan. Also, there, you know, obviously, you know, mom and dad are working, and you know, we've learned through Detroit with the gold program that it works, that making sure that kids are able to you know, have somewhere to go after school, that they're not getting in trouble between 3 and 5 o'clock when mama's
Yeah.
still at work. We put in money for the 50 million towards after school programs to
Oh,
help support that.
wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. Now, one of the things that I've been really you know, passionate about is mental health needs,
Yes.
and we've tried so many times in our state to do programs like OK to Say, make sure kids can pick up the phone and talk to someone if they're having issues or need some support. We also have made sure that, you know, I put legislation that's sitting in the House right now to make sure our educators can find ways to, through their professional development, to identify when kids are having a mental health issue or need some additional supports. And we've learned through Oxford, unfortunately, that
Yes.
that tragic circumstance could have been avoided. You know, had my
Yes.
legislation been passed, we would have had some measures in place to know that you know,
This
this
child
student
needed some
needed,
help.
he needed some
And
help, and he needed to go and talk to somebody and be evaluated. And
yes.
and so the governor has prioritized this with $361 million towards student mental health needs. And so we're prioritizing that as well. We also are making sure that MIPSers, our retirement cost is funded. So there's $1.8 billion towards that. When you talk about our community colleges, we're putting in $470 million towards, and which is an 8.9% increase for them for their general funds. Um, and also that funding does come from the school aid fund, but we have increased that. The school aid fund has been increased, obviously. We also are putting in for higher ed $1.3 billion flat funding for them. That means that they just, you know, they will get a flat funding,
And
you
increase.
know, increase for the
Wonderful.
schools. And then also an additional 2.5% increase over time. There's also, so that's our higher ed institutions. We also will be providing, let me see here. There's a lot of jargon here. I don't want to bore you with that. But we also will be providing from a school standpoint, the reverse transfer agreement. So we have a lot of students who obviously decide to, maybe they go to the college and then decide to go back to community school colleges or well as well. We really need to find a way to make it seamless for our students. So if they go to community college initially and they transfer, that through that transfer they still can get the same type of funding allocation for resources for school. Right now, transfer students are not accounted for when it comes to military, or they're not accounted for when they transfer to like the higher 4-year colleges. And so we need to find a way to make that a little bit more seamless for not only the college students, but also the universities. If, you
That's
know, and yeah, so that's important.
yes. Wow. Boy, I'm so glad there's so much more money in education because boy, we are just. I think this pandemic showed us how much we need to do that. Not just education in terms of knowledge, but the technical piece that our systems are not set up to help students technically. The trouble we ran into with the iPads and some students not having hotspots and not having access to cable, so they couldn't get into class. I mean, there's so many things that were brought to light with the pandemic that we need to make sure we can take care of for these children.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are some of the things we've done from a just a whole, that's some of the things the governor has recommended from a standpoint of higher ed, as well as our education K through 12 systems, and then our Great Star Readiness kids, our 3 to 4 year olds. So yeah, I think those are all great and meaningful things. Now, when it comes to revenue sharing, obviously our cities and villages and townships definitely have not seen revenue sharing at the levels that they had from many plus years ago. And so
Yes.
we have prioritized making sure that they get a 5% increase, but also that 5% increase is ongoing.
Oh, that's important.
Oh,
That it's ongoing.
absolutely.
That's going to be great. That's going
Oh,
to be great.
absolutely. Absolutely, and it's definitely necessary. I mean, I could just think, just for the city of Detroit, we have some liabilities that are coming due by way of our retirement
Yes, our pension.
dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be important to have that increase of revenue. The casinos, which is probably our secondary source of revenue to the city of Detroit, was not operational during a pandemic, so that also has hindered some of that revenue that we receive. And property taxes, quite frankly, is another area where we've seen a decrease in that. So I think it's going to be important, these additional 5% dollars that we're seeing.
Oh, they're going to love that. It's going to be great, I'm sure. Well, you know what? It's time for us to end. My God, it went so fast. Well, that means we got to come
Wow.
back and finish talking about revenue and talk about the budget, because there are lots
Well,
of
I
other
didn't
pieces
get
of
through
the
half the
budget.
budget.
You didn't get through, so you're going to have to come back and talk more about the budget, because it is such a critical piece, and more about the education piece too. We need to have a lot more conversation about that, particularly with what is going on now because of attendance. And for many school districts across the state, they did not reach that 75% attendance each day, which means they won't get revenue for those days for their district. And so hopefully the state will be able to come up with a way to forgive it, simply because, some things you just don't have any control over.
Absolutely.
And so hopefully they'll find a way to forgive some of that. And it's true not just for Detroit, it's true for all across the state. So that's another discussion we need to have, along with, you got to finish the budget. So next time
Wow.
you have to come back. Time went
Absolutely.
really fast, really
Yes,
fast.
it did.
So
Absolutely.
you'll have to come back and talk more about the budget. We'll schedule that. And you can give us the rest of the information about the budget. But thank you so much for coming on
Thank
and
you.
talking about redistricting and all of the other good information that we needed to have. I appreciate it. Time to go. Okay, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Community Bell Show today. And our wonderful Senator Sylvia Santana, she's going to come back. She's got lots more to tell us, everybody. Thank you again. We will see you next Monday on the Community Bell Show. Have a great week. Don't forget, everybody can't be famous, but everybody can be great. You need to have a good heart and a good soul and act on it. Take care, everyone. Have a great week. And happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you for listening to Community Bell with your host, former Wayne County Commissioner Edna Bell. This broadcast was brought to you by WVTC Radio Detroit. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, our website, www.wvtcradio.com, or download our WVTC app from the Play Store for Android users and the App Store for iPhone users. If you've enjoyed this broadcast, tell a friend to tune in. We'll see you next Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern to the Community Bell Show, right here on WVTC Radio Detroit.